Lieutenant Commander Maya Wilson took a deep breath as she straightened her perfectly pressed Navy uniform. Today marked the first day of the new training cycle at the Naval Air Station. After 15 years of service, countless missions, and breaking through one glass ceiling after another, she was still amazed at how the butterflies in her stomach never quite went away before meeting a new class. The gleaming hallway of the training center echoed with her measured footsteps. She'd arrived an hour early to prepare the classroom, review student files one last time, and center herself for what was to come. Maya knew from experience that first impressions mattered, especially for her. As she pushed open the door to the empty classroom, early morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, highlighting the rows of desks facing the whiteboard and projection screen. Model airplanes hung from the ceiling, their shadows dancing across the polished floor. This room had seen generations of naval aviators begin their journeys. Today, 6 new students would join those ranks under her guidance. Maya set her leather briefcase on the desk and pulled out 6 carefully organized folders. Each contained detailed information about the young men who would soon walk through that door. Their academic records were impeccable. They wouldn't have made it this far otherwise, but paper credentials only told part of the story. She flipped open the first folder, revealing the photo of Bradley Thompson, third-generation naval aviator, his father a decorated pilot who now worked for a major defense contractor. His grandfather had flown in Vietnam. His recommendations glowed with praise for his natural instincts and born leadership. Maya had seen this type before. Talented, certainly, but often convinced they had nothing to learn from someone like her. The next folder showcased Christopher Hayes, another legacy admission whose family connections practically guaranteed his spot. His technical scores were actually the lowest of the group, but somehow his application had floated to the top of the pile. His previous instructors noted his confidence and commanding presence, which Maya had learned to recognize as possible code for arrogance. She reviewed the remaining 4 students, all qualified, all from backgrounds that suggested they'd rarely, if ever, been taught by someone who looked like her. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that Maya would be their sole instructor for the next 16 weeks, a new approach the program was testing to provide more consistent training. The sound of voices in the hallway pulled her from her thoughts. She closed the folders, squared them neatly on the desk, and stood tall as the door swung open. 6 young men in crisp uniforms filed in, their conversation dying as they spotted her. Maya recognized the quick flash of surprise that crossed their faces, surprise that never failed to appear no matter how many times she'd seen it over the years. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice clear and commanding. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Wilson. Welcome to Advanced Flight Training." The young men moved to attention, a reflex born of years of military training. "At ease," Maya said, gesturing to the desks. "Take your seats." They obeyed, though she didn't miss the glances exchanged between Thompson and Hayes as they selected seats in the back row. She'd expected as much. "Over the next 16 weeks, I'll be your primary instructor for both classroom and flight training," she continued, pacing slowly before them. "This program has a 38% washout rate. Not everyone sitting in this room today will make it to graduation." She paused, making brief eye contact with each student. Most met her gaze respectfully. Thompson and Hayes held it a beat too long, challenge evident in their expressions. "Your schedule is on the screen behind me," Maya said, clicking a remote. A detailed timetable appeared, color-coded and packed with classes, simulator time, physical training, and actual flight hours. "We begin at 500 each day and typically end around 1900, though additional study time will be required. Weekends are not free. You'll have maintenance training and emergency procedure drills." She noticed Thompson lean over and whisper something to Hayes, who suppressed a smile. Maya had dealt with this before. She simply continued as if she hadn't noticed. "Any questions before we go over the syllabus?" A hand went up from the front row. A young man with earnest eyes and a name tag reading Chen looked at her with genuine curiosity. "Commander Wilson, I read about your deployment in the Gulf. Is it true you landed an FA-18 with partial hydraulic failure?" Maya nodded, appreciating the respectful question. Yes, though that particular incident has been somewhat dramatized in retelling. We'll cover hydraulic failures extensively in week 7. Thompson's hand shot up next, though he spoke before she acknowledged him. No disrespect, Commander, but most of us have been flying since we were teenagers. Are we really going to spend time on basics like navigation and weather patterns? There it was, the first challenge, right on schedule. Mr. Thompson, Maya replied, calmly, I'm well aware of your background, and yes, we absolutely will cover those topics, because flying a Cessna with your father is not the same as navigating a fighter jet in combat conditions. Thompson's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. From the back of the room, Hayes didn't bother raising his hand. I heard they're really pushing diversity in the instructor ranks these days, he said. The comment directed more to his classmates than to her. Guess that's good for some people. The room fell silent. The other students looked uncomfortable, eyes darting between Hayes and Maya, waiting to see her reaction. Maya had learned long ago that showing anger only reinforced their preconceptions. Instead, she smiled slightly. Mr. Hayes, since you've brought up the topic of selection criteria, perhaps you'd like to share your understanding of the qualifications required to become an instructor here? Hayes blinked, caught off guard by her measured response. Well, I assume combat experience, flight hours, that sort of thing. Correct, Maya nodded. I have logged 3,200 combat hours, served 3 tours in active combat zones, and graduated at the top of my class at both the Naval Academy and this very program. I've certified 47 pilots who are currently serving throughout the fleet, and I've written 2 of the emergency protocols in your textbook. She paused, letting the information sink in. Are there other aspects of my qualifications you'd like to discuss before we proceed with the actual training you're here to receive? Hayes had the good sense to look slightly abashed. No, Commander. Excellent, Maya said, turning back to the schedule on the screen. Now, as I was saying, we begin tomorrow at 500 with physical training. Following that, we'll have 4 hours of classroom instruction on aircraft systems before lunch. Your first simulator session will be at 1400 hours. She spent the next hour outlining the program in detail, answering legitimate questions, and ignoring the occasional whispered comment from the back row. When the session ended, she assigned their first reading and dismissed them. As they filed out, Maya overheard Thompson mutter to Hayes, "This is going to be a long 16 weeks." Hayes glanced back at her, clearly not caring if she heard. Maybe she'll stick to the classroom and let a real pilot handle our flight training. Maya gathered her materials calmly, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. After they'd gone, she pulled out her laptop and opened a document labeled Student Observation Notes. Under Thompson and Hayes, she made her first entries, documenting their comments and behavior with clinical precision. Admiral Reeves had advised this approach when he'd assigned her to this class. Document everything, he'd told her. Give them enough rope to hang themselves. We're trying to change the culture here, but it won't happen overnight. Maya understood his strategy. These students had to learn that the Navy was changing, with or without their approval. Some would adapt. Others would wash out. Either way, the next generation of naval aviators would be different, better, than those who came before. As she packed up to leave, Maya paused at the window, looking out at the airfield where a fighter jet was coming in for a landing. She smiled to herself, remembering her own training days and the challenges she'd overcome to stand where she was now. 16 weeks, she murmured to herself. We'll see who's still standing at the end. The simulator room hummed with the sound of cooling fans as Maya watched her students struggle through their first emergency drill. 3 weeks into training, and the patterns were already clear. While 4 of her students approached each task, with dedication, Thompson and Hayes continued to resist her guidance at every turn. You're overcompensating, Maya said, standing behind Thompson as he wrestled with the simulated controls. On the screen before him, warning lights flashed as his virtual aircraft pitched dangerously. Small, precise adjustments. You're fighting. The aircraft, instead of working with it, Thompson's jaw clenched. With all due respect, Commander, that's not how my father taught me to handle this situation. Maya kept her voice neutral. Your father's techniques may work fine in a civilian aircraft in clear conditions. This is a naval fighter experiencing multiple system failures in a storm. Different scenario, different approach. From the next simulator, Hayes snorted. Let him try his way. Some things you can't learn from a textbook. Maya turned to Hayes, whose own simulation had ended in a crash just minutes earlier. Mr. Hayes, since your approach resulted in the loss of $100 million aircraft, perhaps you are not in the best position to offer advice. The other students, Chen, Patel, Rodriguez, and Williams, kept their eyes fixed on their own screens, though Maya caught the slight smile on Rodriguez's face. 5-minute break, Maya announced, checking her watch. Then we'll run the scenario again. As the students filed out for water and restroom breaks, Maya pulled out her tablet and added to her growing documentation. 3 weeks of daily notes painted a disturbing picture of Thompson and Hayes's behavior. When they thought she couldn't hear, their comments had grown increasingly disrespectful, with references to her gender, race, and occasional speculation about how she'd really earned her position. What bothered her most wasn't their attitude toward her. She'd developed thick skin years ago, but how it affected the other students. Patel, initially eager and engaged, had grown quieter in recent days, seemingly afraid to appear too supportive of her instruction. Even Chen, who'd shown genuine respect from day one, now hesitated before asking questions. The door opened, and Admiral Reeves stepped in. In his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and the weathered face of a man who'd spent decades in cockpits, he nodded to Maya. Commander Wilson, how are they progressing? Mixed results, sir, Maya replied, walking with him to the corner of the room where they could speak privately. 4 of them are on track. 2 are actively resistant to instruction. Thompson and Hayes? Reeves asked, unsurprised. Yes, sir. Maya showed him her tablet. I've documented everything as you suggested. It's gone beyond simple disrespect. They're actively undermining my authority with the other students. Reeves scanned through her notes, his expression hardening. This crosses several lines, Commander. I could step in now. Maya shook her head. Not yet, sir. They still don't recognize how much they don't know. I'd prefer they learn that lesson before facing consequences. Reeves studied her for a moment, then nodded. Your call. You've earned that right. But if it escalates further, I'll let you know immediately, Maya assured him. The students began returning, Thompson and Hayes, entering last, their conversation stopping abruptly when they spotted the Admiral. Gentlemen, Reeves greeted them with a nod before turning back to Maya. Carry on, Commander. I look forward to your weekly report. After he left, Maya noticed a subtle change in Thompson and Hayes's demeanor. Respectful in the presence of the older white man with admiral's stripes, dismissive once he was gone. The double standard was so familiar she almost found it amusing. Back to your stations, she ordered. We'll run through the storm scenario again. The next hour showed marginal improvement, though Thompson continued to ignore key aspects of her instruction, relying instead on techniques that might work in perfect conditions but failed spectacularly in the complex emergency she'd programmed. When his simulation ended with another crash, his frustration boiled over. This simulator is rigged, he snapped. No actual aircraft would respond this way. Maya raised an eyebrow. The simulator is calibrated to exact specifications. The aircraft responded exactly as it would in reality. Hayes backed up his friend. Maybe for pilots who fly by the book. Some of us have more natural instincts. Natural instincts are valuable, Maya replied evenly. But they need to be paired with proper technique and respect for the aircraft's limitations. Otherwise, they're just dangerous overconfidence. Thompson muttered something under his breath that Maya pretended not to hear, though Rodriguez, sitting nearby, looked shocked. That's enough for today, Maya said, checking her watch. Review the Emergency Procedures Manual, Chapters 7 through 9, before tomorrow's session. Focus especially on hydraulic failures and electrical system malfunctions. As the students gathered their materials, Maya called out, Mr. Thompson, Mr. Hayes, a moment, please. The two exchanged glances before approaching her desk. The other students filed out, Rodriguez giving Maya a sympathetic look as he left. Once, They were alone. Maya leaned against her desk, arms crossed. "Gentlemen, we need to address the elephant in the room." "Ma'am?" Thompson feigned ignorance. "For 3 weeks you've resisted instruction, undermined my authority, and made comments that would get you grounded in any operational unit. This stops, now." Hayes put on a look of injured innocence. "We're just trying to learn in our own way. Different approaches work for different people. There's a difference between learning styles and outright insubordination," Maya replied. "Your behavior isn't just disrespectful to me. It's creating a toxic environment for your fellow students and setting you up for failure when you face real emergencies." Thompson's false politeness slipped. "With all due respect, Commander, we come from flying families. We've been around aircraft our entire lives. Maybe your approach works for beginners, but that's exactly the problem," Maya cut him off. "You believe your background means you don't need to learn anything new. That kind of thinking gets pilots killed." "Look," Hayes said, dropping all pretense, "we all know why you're here. The Navy needed to check some boxes, that's fine. But don't expect us to pretend." Maya held up her hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "I'm going to give you both one opportunity to rethink what you were about to say. Then I'm going to make myself very clear." The momentary silence was heavy. "I don't care about your family connections. I don't care about your previous experience. In this program, you are students and I am your instructor. Your options are to learn what I'm teaching or wash out. There is no third option where you continue as you have been." She let her words sink in. "Do I make myself clear?" Thompson's face had reddened, but he managed a tight, "Yes, Commander." Hayes merely nodded, his expression unreadable. "Dismissed," Maya said. After they left, she added detailed notes about the conversation to her documentation. Despite her firm words, she had little hope their attitudes would change. Men like them rarely did unless forced by circumstances they couldn't ignore or deny. The following morning's classroom session proved her right. While Thompson and Hayes had dialed back their overt disrespect, they'd adopted a new tactic, asking technical questions clearly designed to try to catch her in a mistake or expose a gap in her knowledge. "Commander," Thompson asked with false politeness during her lecture on fuel systems, "could you explain again the difference in pressure tolerances between the FA-18E and F models? My father mentioned they were designed with different specifications." Maya didn't miss a beat. "The F model's fuel system operates at a maximum pressure of 28 psi, while the E model was upgraded to handle 32 psi during sustained high G maneuvers. This allows for more reliable fuel flow during extreme combat maneuvers. Your father is correct that they differ, though the operational impact is minimal under normal conditions." Thompson looked disappointed that his trap had failed. Next to him, Hayes tried a different approach. "Commander, I've heard that female pilots typically can't sustain the same G-forces as male pilots due to physiological differences. Has that affected your combat approach?" The question, thinly disguised as technical curiosity, was designed to highlight gender differences. Several students looked uncomfortable, while Patel actually turned around to give Hayes a disapproving look. Maya smiled slightly. "That's a common misconception, Mr. Hayes. While there are some statistical differences in G tolerance across genders, they're minor compared to the variations between individuals regardless of gender. My personal G tolerance was measured at 9.2 G, sustained, which puts me in the top 8% of all naval aviators. More importantly, G tolerance can be improved through proper training and techniques, which we'll cover next week." Hayes's face fell as his attempt to undermine her backfired, actually highlighting her exceptional capabilities instead. The remainder of the classroom session continued without incident, though Maya noticed Rodriguez and Chen seemed more engaged than before, asking legitimate questions and taking detailed notes. Perhaps the others were starting to see through Thompson and Hayes's behavior. That afternoon, during the pre-flight briefing for their first actual cockpit familiarization exercise, Maya noticed a change in the group dynamic. The 4 other students positioned themselves closer to her and further from Thompson and Hayes, a subtle but clear indication of shifting loyalties. "Tomorrow will be your first time in an actual T-45 trainer," Maya explained as they reviewed the aircraft diagrams. Today's ground exercise is to ensure you're completely familiar with every switch, gauge, and procedure before you set foot in that cockpit. Will you be in the aircraft with us, Commander? Chen asked. Yes. These are two-seater trainers. I'll be in the instructor's seat for each of your flights. Hayes couldn't resist one more dig. All due respect, but wouldn't it make more sense to have different instructors so we get various perspectives? Maya fixed him with a steady gaze. That would be contrary to the purpose of this experimental training group, Mr. Hayes. The program is specifically testing whether consistent one-on-one instruction produces better results than the traditional rotating instructor model. What she didn't add was that she'd been selected for this experiment precisely because of her outstanding record and ability to handle difficult students. Admiral Reeves had made it clear, this program wasn't just about training methods. It was about changing the culture. As the students practiced cockpit procedures on the ground trainer, Maya watched Tom. Son and Hayes continued to take shortcuts, rushing through checklists and skipping steps they deemed unnecessary. The other students, by contrast, methodically followed each procedure exactly as taught. Maya made notes on her tablet, adding to the growing documentation. Despite their continued resistance, she remained patient. In her experience, reality was the most effective teacher. Sooner or later, Thompson and Hayes would face a situation where their natural instincts and family connections couldn't save them. She just hoped that lesson wouldn't come at too high a cost. The morning sky glowed pink and orange as Maya walked across the tarmac. Her flight suit zipped tight against the early chill. 8 weeks into the 16-week program, today marked a significant milestone, the first 4-person training flight. Until now, she'd taken students up individually or in pairs. Today, Thompson, Hayes, Rodriguez, and Chen would fly together in the larger training aircraft with Maya supervising from the instructor's position. The maintenance crew had already completed their checks, and the training aircraft, a 4-seater variant of the T-45, stood ready on the runway. Its sleek lines gleamed in the rising sun, fuel tanks full and systems primed for the day's exercises. Maya spotted her 4 students walking toward her, flight bags slung over their shoulders. Thompson and Hayes walked ahead, talking animatedly, while Rodriguez and Chen followed a few paces behind. The group dynamic had solidified over the past weeks. Thompson and Hayes remained resistant and cocky, while the other 4 students had developed into a cohesive team that respected Maya's instruction. Good morning, gentlemen, Maya greeted them. Weather conditions are ideal for today's exercise. Clear skies, light winds from the northeast at 5 knots, visibility unlimited. Perfect day for flying, Chen commented, looking up at the cloudless, blue expanse above them. Indeed, Maya agreed. Let's review the flight plan one more time before we board. They gathered around as she laid out a map on a nearby equipment crate. We'll take off heading east, climb to 10,000 feet, then follow this route along the coastline. Her finger traced the path. At waypoint Alpha, we'll practice navigation exercises. At Bravo, we'll simulate communications failure protocols. At Charlie, we'll perform the handling exercises we discussed yesterday. Hayes looked bored. Basic stuff. When do we get to the advanced maneuvers? Maya met his gaze steadily. Flying isn't about flashy maneuvers, Mr. Hayes. It's about mastering fundamentals so thoroughly that they become second nature. That mastery is what saves lives when things go wrong. My dad says, Thompson began. Your father is an accomplished pilot, Maya interrupted, her patience wearing thin after weeks of the same resistance. But he's not your instructor. I am. And in my aircraft, we follow my protocols. Thompson's face reddened, but he fell silent. Mr. Thompson will take the pilot's seat for takeoff and the first leg to waypoint Alpha, Maya continued. Mr. Hayes will handle communications. Mr. Rodriguez will monitor systems, and Mr. Chen will assist with navigation. We'll rotate positions at each waypoint so everyone gets practice in each role. They nodded, Thompson looking slightly mollified at being assigned the pilot's seat first. One final reminder, Maya said, her voice serious. This is not a civilian joyride. Every instruction I give is to be followed immediately and precisely. Questions can be asked during debriefing, not in the air. Is that understood? Yes, Commander. They replied in unison, even Thompson and Hayes managing to sound professional. Good. Let's go. As they boarded, Maya caught snippets of conversation between Thompson and Hayes. Finally get to show what we can really do, Thompson was saying. Just follow her precious checklists until we're up, then, Hayes replied, his voice dropping too low for Maya to hear the rest. She filed the exchange away in her mental documentation and took her position in the instructor's seat, which gave her override capability for all controls. While the student, in the pilot's seat, would fly the aircraft, she could take over instantly if necessary. The pre-flight checks went smoothly, with each student performing their assigned tasks competently, if not enthusiastically in Thompson and Hayes' case. Thompson ran through the startup sequence flawlessly. Whatever his attitude problems, his technical skills were solid. Tower, Navy Training Force 7 requesting clearance for takeoff, Hayes said into his headset, his radio protocol correct. The controller's voice came back promptly. Navy Training Force 7, you are cleared for takeoff on runway 27, winds 5 knots from northeast. Acknowledged, Tower. Cleared for takeoff on 27, Hayes confirmed. Final checks complete. Rodriguez reported from his position. All systems green. Navigation systems initialized and functioning, Chen added. Course to Waypoint Alpha is programmed. Maya nodded. Mr. Thompson, you may begin takeoff procedures. Thompson's hands moved confidently over the controls. The aircraft began rolling down the runway, picking up speed smoothly. Maya watched his technique carefully. He handled the controls well, maintaining the center line perfectly as they accelerated. Rotation speed approaching, Maya noted. Prepare to lift off. Thompson pulled back on the yoke with practiced ease, and the aircraft rose from the runway, climbing steadily into the clear morning sky. The landing gear retracted with a mechanical whir, and they banked slightly to the east, following their planned route. Nice takeoff, Mr. Thompson, Maya acknowledged. Credit where it was due. The maneuver had been textbook perfect. A slight smile crossed Thompson's face at the compliment. For a brief moment, Maya hoped it might signal a turning point in his attitude. That hope faded quickly as they reached cruising altitude. Permission to try a steeper climb rate on the next ascent, Commander? Thompson asked. The aircraft can handle a much more aggressive angle than what's in the manual. Negative, Maya replied. We follow standard protocols for training flights. This isn't an air show. Thompson's jaw tightened, but he maintained course and altitude as instructed. Beside him, Hayes shot him a look that clearly said, later. They reached Waypoint Alpha without incident. The coastline stretched out below them, waves breaking against rocky shores and sandy beaches. The view was spectacular, but Maya kept her focus on the instruments and her students. Position change, Maya announced. Mr. Rodriguez, take the pilot's seat. Mr. Thompson, move to systems monitoring. Mr. Hayes, continue with communications. Mr. Chen, continue with navigation. They made the switch smoothly, with Rodriguez settling into the pilot's position with visible excitement. Unlike Thompson, he handled the controls with careful precision, his movements more deliberate but equally effective. Proceed to Waypoint Bravo, Maya instructed. Maintain current altitude and heading. Yes, Commander, Rodriguez replied, focusing intently on his task. Maya noticed Thompson whispering something to Hayes, who smirked in response. She was about to address it when the first warning light flashed on the control panel. Fuel pressure fluctuation in the starboard tank, Chen reported immediately, pointing to the gauge. Mr. Thompson, systems check, Maya ordered. Thompson glanced at the panel with casual confidence. Minor deviation. Probably just a sensor glitch. These training aircraft always have quirky gauges. Maya frowned. That's not an appropriate response. Run the proper diagnostic sequence. With a barely concealed eye roll, Thompson began the procedure, flipping switches and checking readouts. Fuel system diagnostics show all parameters within normal ranges. Like I said, just a sensor hiccup. The warning light flickered, then went out. Maya made a mental note to have maintenance check the fuel pressure sensors after they landed. Small issues sometimes signaled bigger problems. And Thompson's dismissive attitude toward warning indicators was exactly the kind of overconfidence that led to accidents. They continued toward waypoint Bravo, the aircraft performing well despite the yaoi momentary warning. Rodriguez handled the controls competently, following the flight plan precisely. Chen called out navigation points with quiet efficiency, while Hayes managed communications professionally, if somewhat mechanically. At waypoint Bravo, they rotated positions again. Hayes took the pilot's seat with Thompson handling communications, Rodriguez on navigation, and Chen monitoring systems. Simulated communications failure exercise will begin in 2 minutes, Maya announced. Mr. Hayes, you will lose radio contact with the tower. You'll need to follow proper protocol for communications failure. Hayes nodded, a confident smile playing at his lips. No problem, Commander. As Hayes took control, Maya immediately noticed a difference in his handling of the aircraft. Where Thompson had been technically proficient and Rodriguez methodical, Hayes flew with an aggressive style that pushed the boundaries of acceptable parameters. The aircraft banked more steeply than necessary, and his altitude control fluctuated beyond standard margins. Mr. Hayes, maintain proper flight parameters, Maya instructed. You're exceeding recommended bank angles for this exercise. Aircraft's responding fine, Hayes replied dismissively. These manuals are written with excessive safety margins. Any decent pilot knows the real capabilities. From the system's monitoring position, Chen spoke up, his voice concerned. Commander, we're seeing elevated engine temperature readings. Maya checked her instruments. The readings were indeed climbing, likely due to Hayes's aggressive maneuvering. Mr. Hayes, level out immediately and reduce power to 85%. Hayes complied, but slowly and with obvious reluctance. These engines can handle much higher temps than the gauges suggest is optimal. That's not your call to make, Maya said firmly. The parameters exist for a reason. Follow them. The communications failure exercise began with all radio contact temporarily disabled for training purposes. Hayes handled the protocols adequately, though he skipped several recommended steps in the checklist, taking shortcuts that Maya noted for the debriefing. As they approached waypoint Charlie, the warning light for the fuel system flashed again, more persistently this time. Fuel pressure dropping in starboard tank, Chen reported, his voice tense. Down 12% from nominal. Run full diagnostics, Maya ordered. Mr. Hayes, begin contingency routing to return to base. Thompson, now handling communications, scoffed audibly. It's just acting up again. Same sensor issue as before. We don't make assumptions about warning indicators, Maya replied sharply. We treat each one as legitimate until proven otherwise. Chen ran the diagnostics with careful precision. Commander, pressure continues to drop, now 18% below nominal. Temperature readings in the fuel line are also elevated. Maya made a quick decision. Exercise terminated. We're returning to base. Immediately, she toggled her radio. Tower, Navy Training 47 returning due to possible fuel system malfunction. Request priority landing. Thompson sighed dramatically as he relayed her message, his tone suggesting he thought the precaution unnecessary. Navy 47, cleared, for direct return. You have priority. Emergency crew standing by as precaution, the tower responded. Mr. Hayes, I'm taking control, Maya announced, engaging her override. The control yoke in front of Hayes went slack as she assumed command. From her instructor's position, Hayes turned in his seat, clearly annoyed. Commander, this is excessive. It's a minor fluctuation. We're cutting the exercise short for nothing. That's not your determination to make, Maya replied, already plotting the most efficient return course. When multiple warning indicators suggest a potential fuel system issue, we don't continue the mission to see if they're right. Thompson couldn't resist adding his opinion. My father said the Navy's getting soft on these calls. In his day, they'd finish the mission unless the engine was literally on fire. Maya ignored the comment, focusing on flying the aircraft. The fuel pressure continued to drop slowly, and now the temperature gauge for the starboard engine was climbing, steadily. While not yet in emergency range, the trend was concerning. Chen, keep monitoring those readings. Rodriguez, calculate our fuel consumption at current rates and give me a safety margin for landing, Maya instructed, Both students complied immediately, working together efficiently while Thompson and Hayes exchanged frustrated glances. At current consumption and with the pressure drop, we have a 23-minute safety margin, Commander, Rodriguez reported after making his calculations. Our ETA to base is 17 minutes, Chen added. Within safety parameters, but not by much. Maya nodded, keeping the aircraft steady as she began a gradual descent. The warning lights continued to flash, and now a low-level alarm had begun to sound, indicating the fuel issue was being classified as a potential emergency by the aircraft's systems. "This is ridiculous," Hayes muttered. "The computer's overreacting to minor fluctuations." Maya had had enough. "Mr. Hayes, Mr. Thompson, this is exactly the kind of dismissive attitude toward warning systems that gets pilots killed. Instead of complaining about safety protocols, I suggest you start learning from this real-world demonstration of why we follow them." That silenced them temporarily, though their expressions remained skeptical. As they approached the airfield, Maya's suspicions were confirmed. The fuel pressure in the starboard system dropped precipitously, triggering a full emergency warning. The engine temperature spiked dangerously. "Shutting down starboard engine as precaution," Maya announced, flipping the necessary switches. The aircraft shuddered slightly as it transitioned to single-engine operation, but Maya compensated smoothly, maintaining their approach vector. Thompson and Hayes exchanged wide-eyed glances, their earlier bravado suddenly absent. Tower, Navy, 47 declaring emergency. Operating on port engine only. Fuel system failure in starboard, Maya transmitted calmly. "Understood, Navy 47. You are cleared for immediate landing. Emergency crews in position." Maya handled the approach, with practiced skill, compensating for the asymmetrical thrust of the single engine. The landing was firm but controlled, the aircraft touching down precisely on the center line and rolling to a stop, as fire trucks raced alongside them. Only when they were safely stopped and the systems powered down did Maya turn to her students. Rodriguez and Chen looked impressed and slightly shaken. Thompson and Hayes sat in stunned silence. "And that, gentlemen," Maya said quietly, "is why we don't ignore warning indicators, even when they seem minor. The post-flight inspection will tell us exactly what happened, but I suspect we'll find a significant fuel line failure was developing. Exactly what the initial quirky gauge was trying to tell us." As they exited the aircraft, the maintenance chief was already approaching with his team. Maya briefed him on the indicators they'd experienced, and he nodded grimly. "Good call bringing her back when you did, Commander," he said after his initial inspection. "Looks like the starboard fuel line was developing a stress fracture. Could have been a much bigger problem if you'd continued the flight." Thompson and Hayes, standing nearby, had the grace to look embarrassed. As the students headed toward the debriefing room, Maya stopped to take one last look at the aircraft. The lesson had been delivered more effectively than any classroom lecture could have managed. The question now was whether Thompson and Hayes would finally learn from it, or if they'd find some way to dismiss even this clear demonstration of why protocols existed. She suspected the coming debriefing would tell her everything she needed to know about their capacity to grow beyond their preconceptions. For their sakes and for the safety of anyone who might someday fly with them, she hoped this close call had finally broken through their arrogance. The weather report promised clear skies with moderate turbulence along the coastal training route. Maya studied the forecast carefully as she prepared for the day's flight. 12 weeks into the program, most of her students had progressed remarkably well. Even Thompson and Hayes had shown improvement since the fuel system incident 4 weeks earlier, though their attitude adjustment proved temporary. After a week of apparent humility following the emergency landing, their old habits had gradually resurfaced. While they no longer openly challenged her authority, their compliance remained grudging at best. The sidelong glances, whispered comments, and minimal effort continued, creating a constant undercurrent of tension. Maya checked her watch. The students would arrive for the pre-flight briefing in 30 minutes. Today's exercise would test their abilities more thoroughly than any previous flight. They would be practicing advanced navigation, emergency procedures, and landing techniques in a larger, more complex training aircraft. The four-seater would allow Thompson, Hayes, and 2 other students to fly together, with Maya supervising from the instructor's position. She'd chosen Rodriguez and Patel to accompany them, both solid students whose calm demeanor might help balance Thompson and Hayes's more volatile tendencies. A knock on the briefing room door interrupted her thoughts. Admiral Reeves entered, his expression serious as usual. "Commander Wilson," he greeted her. "How are things progressing with your problem students?" Maya stood respectfully. "Some improvement since the fuel system incident, sir, but not as much as I'd hoped. They're still resistant to instruction, though less openly confrontational." Reeves nodded, unsurprised. "Their fathers have been making calls, asking questions about the program, suggesting their sons might benefit from a different, instructional approach." Maya felt her jaw tighten but kept her expression neutral. "I assume you explained that's not how our training works." "Of course," Reeves confirmed. "I made it very clear that all students complete the program under their assigned instructor or not at all." He paused. "But the pressure will continue. Men like that are used to throwing their weight around." "Yes, sir. I'm familiar with the type." Reeves studied her for a moment. "I've reviewed your documentation. The pattern is clear and concerning. If you wanted to recommend their removal from the program, you'd have my full support." Maya considered this. Washing Thompson and Hayes out of training would certainly make her life easier. But something held her back, perhaps the faint hope that they might yet learn the lessons they so desperately needed. "I'd prefer to continue as planned, sir," she finally said. "They have the technical skills to be good pilots. If they could overcome their attitudes," Reeves raised an eyebrow. "That's a big if, Commander." "Yes, sir, but I've seen more surprising transformations." The Admiral nodded. "Very well, it's your call, but don't hesitate to make the hard decision if it becomes necessary. Better to wash them out now than sign off on pilots who could endanger themselves and others." "Understood, sir." After Reeves left, Maya finished preparing the day's flight plan. The weather system moving in from the west had accelerated according to the latest update. Nothing dangerous, but they might encounter stronger turbulence than initially expected. She made a note to emphasize weather awareness during the briefing. The students arrived precisely on time, filing into the briefing room, with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Rodriguez and Patel took seats in the front row, notebooks ready. Thompson and Hayes slouched into chairs near the back, their body language broadcasting boredom before the briefing even began. "Good morning," Maya began, bringing up the flight plan on the large screen. "Today we'll be practicing emergency procedures in real-world conditions. The forecast shows increasing turbulence along our route, which will add a valuable element of difficulty to the exercises." She outlined the planned route, which would take them along the coastline before turning inland over more rugged terrain. Each student would rotate through different positions, practicing various scenarios that might arise during actual missions. "Mr. Thompson will take the pilot's seat for takeoff in the first leg," Maya continued. "Mr. Hayes will handle communications. Mr. Rodriguez will monitor systems, and Mr. Patel will assist with navigation." Thompson perked up slightly at being assigned the pilot's seat first, a small concession Maya had deliberately made to start the day on a positive note. "Questions before we proceed to pre-flight checks?" Maya asked, looking around the room. Hayes raised his hand with exaggerated politeness. "Commander, given the weather conditions, will we still be practicing the engine-out landing scenario?" "Yes, Mr. Hayes. Naval aviators must be prepared to handle emergency landings under all conditions. The turbulence provides an opportunity to practice under more challenging circumstances." Thompson leaned forward. "My father mentioned that in actual combat situations, the by-the-book approach to engine failures sometimes needs to be modified. Will we be covering those modifications?" Maya recognized the trap. Thompson was trying to suggest that his father's informal advice might contradict her official instruction. "Your father is correct that combat sometimes requires adaptation," she replied smoothly. "However, those adaptations must be built on a foundation of perfect technical execution. Today we're focusing on mastering the fundamentals. Variations can be discussed after you've demonstrated proficiency in standard procedures." Thompson looked disappointed that his attempt to undermine her had failed. "If there are no further questions, let's proceed to the aircraft." As they walked across the tarmac toward the waiting training aircraft, Maya overheard Thompson muttering to Hayes, Finally get to show what I can really do today, he was saying. These training restrictions are ridiculous. My dad said half of what they teach now is just overcautious nonsense. Hayes nodded in agreement. Maybe we'll get some actual turbulence so we can see how the aircraft really handles when pushed. Maya pretended not to hear, but made a mental note to be especially vigilant. Their cavalier attitude toward safety protocols remained deeply concerning. The pre-flight checks went smoothly, each student performing their assigned tasks competently. The maintenance crew had the aircraft ready, its systems recently inspected and fuel tanks topped off. The weather had indeed begun to change, with darker clouds visible on the western horizon and wind gusts occasionally buffeting the airfield. Tower, Navy Training 6-3 requesting clearance for takeoff, Hayes said into his headset once they were all aboard. The controller's voice came back promptly. Navy Training 6-3, you are cleared for takeoff on runway 31. Be advised, wind gust now at 15 knots from the west. Acknowledged, Tower. Cleared for takeoff on 31, Hayes confirmed. All systems show green, Rodriguez reported from his monitoring position. Navigation systems initialized and functioning, Patel added. Course to waypoint Alpha is programmed. Maya nodded. Mr. Thompson, you may begin takeoff procedures. Thompson's hands moved confidently over the controls. The aircraft began rolling down the runway, picking up speed smoothly. Maya watched his technique carefully. Despite her issues with his attitude, she had to acknowledge that his handling of the aircraft was technically sound. They lifted off cleanly, banking slightly to follow their planned route. As they climbed through 3,000 feet, the first turbulence hit, causing the aircraft to bump and shudder. Thompson compensated well, maintaining their course and climb rate despite the rough air. Nice handling, Mr. Thompson, Maya acknowledged. A slight smile crossed Thompson's face at the compliment. For a brief moment, Maya again hoped it might signal a genuine turning point in his attitude. They reached their cruising altitude of 10,000 feet and leveled off. The coastline stretched below them, waves crashing against rocky shores. The turbulence continued intermittently with occasional stronger bumps that required constant small corrections to maintain their course. Approaching waypoint Alpha, Patel announced. Turn to heading 270 in 2 minutes. Acknowledged, Thompson replied, checking his instruments. Maya monitored his performance carefully. He was handling the aircraft well, making the necessary adjustments for turbulence without overcorrecting. His technical skills were undeniably strong, if only his attitude matched his abilities. Position change at waypoint Alpha, Maya reminded them. Mr. Hayes will take the pilot's seat. Mr. Thompson will move to communications. Mr. Rodriguez will handle navigation, and Mr. Patel will monitor systems. They reached the waypoint and executed the position change smoothly. Hayes settled into the pilot's seat with obvious eagerness, taking the controls with an aggressive confidence that immediately concerned Maya. Maintain current altitude and heading for the next leg, she instructed. Be advised, weather radar shows increasing turbulence ahead. Roger that, Hayes replied, his tone suggesting he welcomed the challenge. Sure enough, as they continued, along their route the turbulence intensified. The aircraft bucked and jostled, requiring constant corrections. Hayes handled the controls forcefully, sometimes overcompensating and creating more movement than necessary. Smaller inputs, Mr. Hayes, Maya advised. You're fighting the aircraft instead of working with it. Hayes made a slight adjustment, but his handling remained more aggressive than optimal. From his position monitoring systems, Patel spoke up. G-forces spiking during corrections, he noted quietly, approaching yellow line thresholds. Mr. Hayes, ease up on your control inputs, Maya ordered more firmly. Gentle corrections only. Hayes complied reluctantly, his jaw tight with frustration. Aircraft can handle much more than this, he muttered, just loudly enough to be heard. The issue isn't what the aircraft can handle in perfect conditions, Maya responded evenly. It's about maintaining a safety margin for unexpected situations. Aggressive handling reduces that margin significantly. Before Hayes could respond, a new voice came over the radio. Navy Training 6-3, this is Tower. Be advised, weather system has accelerated. Recommend expedited return to base. Conditions expected to deteriorate rapidly in your training area. Thompson, now handling communications, acknowledged the warning and looked to Maya for instructions. We'll complete the current exercise and then return, Maya decided, checking the updated weather data on her display. They had time to finish the planned emergency procedure practice before the worst of the weather arrived. Mr. Hayes, proceed to Waypoint Bravo where we'll conduct the engine failure simulation. Yes, Commander, Hayes replied, steering toward the designated coordinates. The turbulence continued to intensify as they approached Waypoint Bravo. Dark clouds had gathered to the west, and the air grew increasingly rough. The aircraft rattled and shook, making precise control more challenging. Reaching Waypoint Bravo, Rodriguez announced from the navigation station. Beginning engine failure simulation, Maya declared. Mr. Hayes, I'm disabling the port engine. For this exercise, respond according to protocol. She activated the training system that simulated an engine failure by reducing the port engine to idle. The aircraft immediately began to yaw as the asymmetrical thrust took effect. Hayes reacted, quickly, compensating for the yaw and adjusting the rudder. His initial response was textbook perfect, stabilizing the aircraft despite the turbulence and simulated engine loss. He began running through the emergency checklist, with Patel confirming each step. Maintaining altitude at 9,800 feet, Hayes reported. Airspeed stable at 280 knots. Good, Maya acknowledged. Now begin your approach to the emergency landing site we identified during briefing. Hayes banked the aircraft, turning toward the designated area, a long, flat stretch of terrain that had been selected as a potential emergency landing zone. In a real emergency, this would be their best option if they couldn't reach an actual airfield. As they descended through 8,000 feet, the turbulence suddenly intensified dramatically. The aircraft lurched violently, dropping several hundred feet before Hayes could compensate. Warning alarms began to sound as they encountered severe wind shear, a dangerous condition where wind speed and direction change rapidly with altitude. Simulation terminated, Maya announced, immediately reactivating the port engine. Full power to both engines. Climbed to 10,000 feet to clear the wind shear. Hayes pushed the throttles forward, but instead of the standard climbing procedure, he pulled back sharply on the control yoke, pitching the aircraft's nose up at a dangerously steep angle. Level out, Maya ordered sharply. Standard climb profile only. But Hayes, perhaps rattled by the sudden turbulence or overconfident in his abilities, continued the steep climb. The airspeed began dropping rapidly as the aircraft fought against gravity at the excessive angle. Airspeed falling below minimum safe threshold, Patel warned urgently. Approaching stall conditions. Mr. Hayes, nose down immediately, Maya commanded. You're going to stall the aircraft. Hayes finally seemed to realize his error and pushed forward on the controls. But his correction was too abrupt. The aircraft pitched downward sharply, then bounced back up as another violent burst of turbulence hit them. Alarms blared as the aircraft systems detected the erratic flight path. I have control, Maya announced firmly, engaging her instructor override. The controls in front of Hayes went slack as she took command from her position. With smooth, precise movements, she stabilized the aircraft, bringing it back to level flight and a safe airspeed. Tower, Navy 6-3 requesting immediate return to base, she transmitted. Encountered severe wind shear during training exercise. Navy 6-3, cleared for direct return. Be advised, conditions continuing to deteriorate. Expedite your return. Maya plotted the most efficient course back to the airfield, maintaining firm control as the turbulence continued to buffet the aircraft. In the pilot's seat, Hayes sat rigid, his face flushed with embarrassment or anger. Perhaps both. Commander, I could have recovered, he said stiffly. I just needed another second. Another second might have put us into a full stall in severe turbulence, Maya replied, her focus on flying the aircraft. That's not a risk I'm willing to take with 4 lives aboard. From the communications position, Thompson couldn't resist defending his friend. It was just a momentary overcorrection. Any pilot could have made the same mistake in these conditions. The mistake wasn't the initial error, Maya explained, her voice calm despite the tension. It was ignoring standard procedures in favor of an aggressive maneuver, then making a second error by overcorrecting. That's exactly what we've been discussing for 12 weeks now, the danger of overconfidence and disregard for established protocols. Hayes and Thompson fell silent, chastened at least temporarily by the undeniable reality of what had just happened. The return flight was challenging, with turbulence growing stronger as the weather system continued to intensify. Maya handled the controls with steady precision, making small, continuous adjustments to maintain their course and altitude. Even in these difficult conditions, she made it look effortless, the result of years of experience and rigorous adherence to proper technique. "This is how you handle turbulence," she explained as she flew. "Small, gentle inputs. Work with the aircraft, not against it. Feel how it wants to respond and help it along rather than forcing it." Rodriguez and Patel watched attentively, clearly learning from her demonstration. Thompson and Hayes were less receptive, their expressions suggesting they viewed the situation as a fluke rather than a lesson. As they approached the airfield, conditions had deteriorated further. Rain now pelted the windscreen, and wind gusts buffeted the aircraft from all sides. The landing would be challenging even for an experienced pilot. "Tower, Navy 6-3 on final approach," Thompson transmitted. "Navy 6-3 cleared to land runway 31. Wind now gusting to 25 knots, variable direction. Use caution." "Acknowledged, Tower," Thompson replied. "Cleared to land runway 31. Maya focused intently on her approach, calculating. The wind corrections needed to keep them aligned with the runway despite the gusts. The aircraft bobbed and weaved in the turbulent air, requiring constant adjustments. "Watch closely," she instructed her students. "This is where discipline matters most. Follow the numbers, trust your instruments, maintain your glide slope even when it feels wrong." She demonstrated exactly what she was describing, handling the difficult approach with methodical precision. Despite the challenging conditions, she kept them perfectly aligned with the runway centerline, adjusting for each gust with minimal control movements. As they descended through 500 feet, a violent crosswind gust hit the aircraft, pushing them suddenly to the right of the runway. "Correcting," Maya announced calmly, applying the proper control inputs to bring them back on course. The aircraft responded, drifting back toward the center line. They crossed the runway threshold at exactly the right altitude and airspeed, despite the turbulence. Maya executed a textbook landing in the difficult conditions, touching down firmly but smoothly on the center line and bringing the aircraft to a controlled stop. Only when they were safely parked did she turn to address her students. Rodriguez and Patel looked impressed and perhaps a bit relieved to be safely on the ground. Thompson and Hayes sat in uncomfortable silence, their usual bravado notably absent. "That, gentlemen, is why we follow procedures," Maya said quietly. "Not because they're arbitrary rules, but because they work, especially when conditions are at their worst." Hayes stared straight ahead, his jaw working as if he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. "Mr. Hayes, your initial response to the simulated engine failure was excellent," Maya continued, giving credit where it was due. "But your decision to abandon standard climb procedures nearly put us in a dangerous stall condition. In severe turbulence, that could have been catastrophic." "I understand, Commander," Hayes replied stiffly. "Do you?" Maya asked, looking him directly in the eyes. "Because understanding that lesson is the difference between being a pilot who comes home safely and one who doesn't. It's also the difference between a pilot who brings his crew home and one who gets them killed." The blunt statement hung in the air. For perhaps the first time, Maya saw genuine reflection in Hayes' expression, rather than mere defensive anger. "Debriefing in 30 minutes, she announced, beginning the shutdown procedures. "We have a lot to discuss from today's flight." As they exited the aircraft into the now pouring rain, Maya wondered if the lesson had finally penetrated. The close call had been real enough to shake even Thompson and Hayes' confidence. Whether that shake would lead to lasting change remained to be seen. She watched them walk toward the briefing room, heads bent against the rain. Sometimes, she reflected, the most valuable lessons came not from success but from confronting failure, From that moment when reality stripped away pretense and forced you to face your own limitations. For Thompson and Hayes, today might have been such a moment. But only time would tell if they had the character to learn from it. The morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the turbulent weather of the previous week. Maya stood at the window of her office, watching aircraft take off and land. In the distance, it was hard to believe they had reached the final day of the 16-week training program. Tomorrow, the successful students would receive their wings and move on to their assigned units. Those who failed would be processed out of the program. For most of her students, the outcome was clear. Rodriguez, Chen, Williams, and Patel had excelled, demonstrating both technical proficiency and the right mindset. Their future as naval aviators looked promising. For Thompson and Hayes, the situation remained complicated. Despite their technical skills, their attitude problems had persisted, though in a more subdued form since the turbulence incident. They'd become less openly disrespectful, but continued to take shortcuts and ignore protocols they deemed unnecessary. Maya sighed, turning away from the window to review the thick folders on her desk. Today's final evaluation flight would determine their fate. She had prepared a challenging but fair exercise that would test not just their flying abilities but their judgment and adherence to procedures under pressure. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called. Admiral Reeves stepped in, closing the door behind him. "Commander Wilson, I wanted to check in before today's final evaluations." Maya straightened. "Good morning, sir. Everything is prepared." Reeves nodded, taking a seat across from her desk. "I've reviewed your documentation. Thompson and Hayes remain borderline cases." "Yes, sir. They have the technical skills, but their attitude toward safety procedures is still concerning." "Their fathers have both called again," Reeves said grimly, making thinly veiled suggestions that their sons' careers are being unfairly jeopardized. Maya felt a flash of anger but kept her expression neutral. "With all due respect, sir, their sons are jeopardizing their own careers by refusing to follow essential safety protocols." "I agree completely," Reeves assured her. "I made that quite clear to both gentlemen. But the pressure will continue if you pass them, and probably even if you don't." He paused, studying her. "You understand what you're potentially taking on here? These aren't men who accept defeat gracefully." "I'm familiar with the type, sir," Maya replied evenly. "I've been dealing with them my entire career." Reeves nodded. "Of course you have, and you've handled this situation with remarkable patience and professionalism." He stood, straightening his uniform. "Whatever you decide today, you have my full support. Judge them on their merits, nothing more, nothing less." "Thank you, sir. That's exactly what I intend to do." After the Admiral left, Maya gathered her materials for the pre-flight briefing. Today's evaluation would test each student individually in a series of increasingly challenging scenarios. She would fly with each of them one-on-one, assessing their performance against the program's rigorous standards. The students were already assembled in the briefing room when she arrived. Rodriguez, Chen, Williams, and Patel sat alert and ready, their notebooks open. Thompson and Hayes lounged in the back row, affecting a casual confidence that Maya suspected masked genuine nervousness. "Good morning," she began. "Today is your final evaluation flight. Each of you will fly with me individually through a series of predetermined scenarios designed to test everything you've learned over the past 16 weeks. She outlined the basic parameters of the evaluation, though the specific challenges would remain unknown until they were in the air. The order will be alphabetical. Mr. Chen will go first, followed by Mr. Hayes, Mr. Patel, Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Thompson, and Mr. Williams. She paused. Each flight will take approximately 90 minutes. The remaining students will wait in the ready room until called. Will we know our results immediately after our flight? Thompson asked. No. I'll complete all evaluations before announcing any results. All outcomes will be delivered at tomorrow morning's ceremony. Chen's evaluation went smoothly. He handled each challenge with careful precision, following protocols exactly while demonstrating good judgment when presented with unexpected situations. Maya made detailed notes throughout, though she already knew he would pass comfortably. Hayes was next. As they walked to the aircraft, his usual swagger seemed slightly diminished. "Nervous, Mr. Hayes?" Maya asked. He squared his shoulders. "No, ma'am. Just ready to get this over with." The pre-flight checks were conducted in tense silence. Hayes performed each step correctly, though his movements seemed mechanical rather than fluid. Once airborne, Maya began the evaluation scenarios, starting with basic maneuvers before progressing to more complex situations. Hayes handled the aircraft competently, his technical skills evident despite the pressure. "Next scenario," Maya announced when they reached the designated training area. "You've experienced a communications failure. All radio contact is lost. Respond according to protocol." Hayes nodded, beginning the proper procedures. He worked through the checklist methodically, attempting to restore communications through various backup systems. When those failed, part of the scenario, he correctly set his transponder to the emergency code and began the appropriate route and procedures for returning to base without radio contact. "Good," Maya acknowledged. "Communications now restored. Next scenario, you've noticed an oil pressure warning light for the port engine. How do you proceed?" Hayes hesitated, then began the diagnostic sequence. He ran through the checks correctly but rushed through several steps, skipping one procedure entirely in his haste. "Mr. Hayes, you missed the secondary pressure verification," Maya pointed out. "It's redundant if the primary gauge already shows low pressure," Hayes argued. "Just wastes time in an emergency." "The secondary verification exists because primary gauges sometimes fail," Maya countered. "That redundant step has prevented countless unnecessary emergency landings, and sometimes prevented crashes when pilots ignored genuine problems because they assumed a gauge was faulty." Hayes's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more as they continued to the next scenario. By the end of his evaluation, Hayes had demonstrated mixed performance. His technical handling of the aircraft remained strong, but his continued resistance to following complete procedures was troubling. Maya made detailed notes but kept her expression neutral, giving no indication of his status. Patel and Rodriguez both performed excellently in their evaluations, as Maya had expected. Williams likewise demonstrated solid skills and proper procedure adherence. Thompson was last before Williams. Like Hayes, he seemed less cocky than usual as they prepared for his evaluation flight. "Looking forward to getting my wings tomorrow," he commented as they walked to the aircraft, trying to project confidence. Maya neither encouraged nor discouraged him. "Let's focus on today's evaluation first." Once in the air, Thompson handled the initial scenarios competently. His technical skills were actually the strongest of all the students, his natural aptitude for flying evident in his smooth control inputs and precise maneuvering. "Next scenario," Maya announced after he'd completed a complex navigation exercise. "Your aircraft has experienced an electrical system malfunction. Multiple systems are affected. Respond according to protocol." Thompson began working through the procedures, his hands moving confidently across the controls. He prioritized the critical systems correctly and followed most of the checklist properly, though Maya noted he skipped 2 steps he evidently deemed unnecessary. "Mr. Thompson, you've missed the circuit isolation procedure," she pointed out. "Those older systems aren't even in modern aircraft anymore," Thompson replied dismissively. "My father says the checklist hasn't been updated to reflect actual fleet practices." "Your father is incorrect," Maya said firmly. "That procedure was revalidated just last year, after an electrical fire in an FA-18E almost resulted in the loss of an aircraft. The pilot's adherence to the complete checklist was specifically cited in the investigation as having prevented a catastrophe." Thompson looked skeptical but said nothing more. As they continued through increasingly challenging scenarios, Maya presented the final and most difficult test, a combination of mechanical failure, adverse weather conditions, and a simulated emergency, requiring immediate decision-making. "You've experienced a hydraulic system failure," she began. "Simultaneously, weather conditions have deteriorated, with ceiling down to 500 feet and visibility at 1 mile. You're 30 minutes from your home base, but only 10 minutes from an alternative airfield. Fuel is adequate for either. How do you proceed?" Thompson considered the scenario. I'd divert to the alternative airfield. The hydraulic failure compromises control, and the weather makes a longer flight unnecessarily risky. Maya nodded. It was the correct decision, prioritizing safety over convenience. Begin your approach to the alternative airfield, she instructed. Thompson turned toward the designated coordinates, setting up for an approach in the simulated poor weather conditions. He handled the aircraft well despite the simulated hydraulic issues maintaining proper airspeed and descent rate. As they descended through 2,000 feet in the scenario, Maya added a new complication. Tower advises that emergency vehicles are occupied with another incident and will be delayed in responding to your arrival. Thompson frowned. How long of a delay? Approximately 15 minutes after landing. Thompson hesitated, then made a decision that immediately concerned Maya. In that case, I'll divert back to home base. With emergency crews ready, it's worth the extra flight time. Despite the hydraulic failure and weather conditions, Maya asked, giving him an opportunity to reconsider. The aircraft is handling well enough, Thompson insisted. The risk of fire after landing is more significant than the risk of continuing flight with the hydraulic issue. It was exactly the wrong decision, prioritizing a hypothetical risk over an actual mechanical failure in deteriorating weather conditions. Even worse, it contradicted his own earlier correct assessment. Mr. Thompson, that decision directly contradicts established emergency procedures, Maya said firmly. A confirmed mechanical failure takes precedence over speculative concerns about emergency response times. It's a judgment call, Thompson argued. In the real world, pilots make these decisions based on their assessment of the situation. Judgment must be informed by proper procedure and risk assessment, Maya countered. The protocols exist because collective experience has determined the safest course of action in these scenarios. Thompson's expression hardened, his earlier nervousness giving way to defensive anger. My father has made these exact kinds of calls throughout his career. Sometimes you have to go beyond the checklist. Your father isn't flying this aircraft, Maya replied evenly, and his approach isn't the standard by which naval aviators are judged. The remainder of Thompson's evaluation proceeded in tense silence. His technical handling remained excellent, but his decision-making had revealed a fundamental flaw in his approach to aviation. Exactly the issue Maya had documented throughout the training program. After Williams completed his evaluation as the final student, Maya returned to her office to review her notes and make her decisions. The sun was setting by the time she finished her assessments, casting long shadows across the airfield. For 4 of her students, the decision was easy. They had demonstrated both technical proficiency and the proper mindset. They would receive their wings with her full confidence. For Thompson and Hayes, the decision weighed heavily. Their technical skills were undeniable, but their continued resistance to following proper procedures and their flawed decision-making under pressure presented serious concerns. Could she in good conscience certify them as ready to join the fleet? Knowing their attitudes might eventually endanger themselves or others, she remembered Admiral Reeves's words. Judge them on their merits. Nothing more, nothing less. The evidence was clear. Despite 16 weeks of training, Thompson and Hayes had failed to grasp the most fundamental lesson of aviation, that procedures and protocols weren't arbitrary restrictions, but essential safeguards built on decades of hard-won experience often purchased with lives. With a heavy but certain heart, Maya made her decision and completed the final paperwork. Tomorrow would be difficult, but she was confident she was doing the right thing, not just for the Navy, but for Thompson and Hayes themselves. Better they face this disappointment now than continue down a path that could lead to tragedy. The next morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the winging ceremony. Families had gathered to celebrate their loved ones' achievements, including Thompson's and Hayes's fathers, both imposing men in expensive suits who stood together near the front, exuding confidence and privilege. Maya wore her dress uniform, medals gleaming in the morning sun. Admiral Reeves would present the wings, but as the student's primary instructor, she would call each name and announce their status. The ceremony began with Admiral Reeves's brief remarks about the importance of the day, and the rigorous standards each student had been required to meet. Now, he concluded, Commander Wilson will present the candidates who have successfully completed the program. Maya stepped forward, her expression solemn but composed. Aviation candidate Chen, she called. Chen stepped forward, standing at attention. Aviation candidate Chen has successfully completed all requirements of the Advanced Flight Training Program and is hereby certified as a naval aviator, with all the responsibilities and privileges thereto. Admiral Reeves pinned the wings to Chen's uniform as applause broke out. Chen's family beamed with pride. Aviation candidate Hayes, Maya called next. Hayes stepped forward, standing rigidly at attention, a confident smile playing at his lips. Maya met his gaze directly. Aviation candidate Hayes has not met the standards required for certification as a naval aviator. He is hereby referred to the review board for possible readmission to training under a different instructor. A shocked murmur ran through the audience. Hayes's face froze in disbelief, his confident smile crumbling into confusion and then anger. His father stood up from his seat, face reddening. Maya continued through the remaining students. Patel, Rodriguez, and Williams all received their wings to enthusiastic applause, though the atmosphere remained tense after Hayes's unexpected failure. Aviation candidate Thompson, Maya called finally. Thompson stepped forward, his expression a mixture of hope and dread. After Hayes's outcome, he clearly realized his own status might be in jeopardy. Aviation candidate Thompson has not met the standards required for certification as a naval aviator. He is hereby referred to the review board for possible readmission to training under a different instructor. Another shockwave rippled through the audience. Thompson's father stood up beside Hayes's father, both men now openly glaring at Maya. Thompson himself seemed unable to process what had happened, standing frozen in place until Rodriguez gently guided him back to his seat. After the ceremony concluded, chaos erupted. Thompson's and Hayes's fathers immediately approached Admiral Reeves, their voices raised in angry protest. Maya found herself surrounded by her successful students and their families, offering congratulations and thanks. Commander Wilson, Chen said quietly as his parents looked on with pride. I just wanted to say thank you. I learned more from you than just how to fly an aircraft. You'll make an excellent aviator, Mr. Chen, Maya replied with genuine warmth. Remember what you learned. Here when you're training others. Rodriguez shook her hand firmly. My uncle was a pilot in the Gulf War, he said. He always told me the best instructors were the ones who didn't let you cut corners. I didn't understand what he meant until this program. Before Maya could respond, Admiral Reeves approached, his expression serious. Commander Wilson, a word in private, please. They stepped away from the crowd, finding a quiet corner of the reception area. Thompson and Hayes's fathers are demanding a review of your decision.